You're listening to the Womanpreneur podcast. Empowerment in business and life.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Womanpreneur podcast. My name is Melissa Moats and I'm hanging out with my good friend, Amanda McEwen.
Oh, I get a song this week.
Yes.
I like it.
I am happy to see you today.
I'm happy to see you too.
Thank you. What's going on?
What is going on?
What are we going to talk about today? You had this
Oh,
brilliant
does it feel
topic.
elusive to you? Because we just kind of came up with it.
I'm excited.
Well, what we are talking about is creating opportunities, which is a big thing that I believe in, that you create your own opportunities. And I think the reason this came into my mind, I was on my way back from LA talking to another producer, and we were just kind of talking about life in general and different ideas and beliefs and all of that. And I mentioned, as I do often, that I just genuinely believe that everything happens when it's supposed to. Things work out the way they're meant to work out. And then I said, and part of that is creating opportunities along the way. And he stopped me and he said, well, wait a minute. He said, so you believe in fate, that everything happens the way it's supposed to, but now you're also saying you have to create opportunities. So which is it? And for me, what it comes down to is that it's not so much believing in fate, or it's believing that fate evolves. So I don't think that we all have one set path and that every single thing was predetermined for us when we were born. Mm-hmm. I don't believe that. I do believe, as we talk about a lot, you have to do the work. And so the universe will guide us along in the way that it needs us to, but we have to take control of that too. Yeah. It means you can't just sit back and think, well, I want this, and don't do anything towards it and think, well, I guess it just wasn't in the cards for me.
I have a song in my head that's happening.
Go ahead. Go for it.
One thing leads to another. I'm like, sorry.
Was it The Fix? Is that who that is?
Who is that? I don't know. I'm hearing the whole jam in my head right now. One thing leads to another. Is that 80s? Probably.
Yeah. I feel like it's... I'm going to guess...
One thing.
The Fix. Another. See? Test my 80s music knowledge.
Hey. Thanks,
but see, where I thought you were going with it was actually Blondie in One Way or Another. But
one way or another, I'm going to find you. I'm going to get you.
Oh, Marvin Gaye?
Yeah.
Okay, we could have a medley.
So many good sing-alongs we could do. All right, sorry. Okay. I got excited.
We know you break out into song all the time.
I love to break out into song. But I like what you're saying. Mm-hmm. And I mean, we've said this so many times on our podcast that we are writing our own story. And it's important to remind ourselves that we are in charge of how we want to write that story. Mm-hmm. And one thing does lead to another.
Well, for me, this is the story of my career, right? I never set out to do what I do. It just happened. And it was taking advantage of opportunities along the way. Right. Sometimes creating them, sometimes just taking advantage. And I think both are important. But it started kind of early on. It was just a matter of timing. Mm-hmm. I just fell into people who had production companies, and that's how I got started. But when I started working with this one particular company, I was hired to do scheduling. That was it. I had this very little bubble of a job, and those were my responsibilities. But what happened is I got in there, and within a few days, I realized this place is a mess. The bookkeeping is all over the place. The systems don't make any sense. The workflow is inefficient. I saw so many opportunities of how I could use my skills to make the place better. Mm-hmm. And so what I did was started doing it. And there's a tactful way. You can't step on other people's toes to get where you want. But if there is an opening, you have those conversations. And I just started doing more than what was expected of me. Mm-hmm. It's always pretty much what I've done since I was my whole life. I like to do more than what's expected of me.
One of your major gifts.
And thank you.
You're welcome.
What happened is I had a friend at the time who was in a very similar situation, who did not do more than what was expected. And her reasoning was, well, they're not paying me to do any more than what I'm doing. And so, valid, I understand. You get paid to do a certain job, so why should you do extra work? But at the same time, you're not going to get recognized and get promoted and get other opportunities if you're only doing the bare minimum to get by. And that's what happened in our careers is mine took off in a different direction because I saw an opportunity and I took it and I created another one. And I said, okay, well, here's another thing I can do. And it was just constantly, let me show you what I can do. Mm-hmm. And people responded to that and they said, thank you. And they kept letting me do more things.
Yeah. And
my friend at the time got stuck in a rut and she got very bitter because she wasn't getting any new opportunities. And I would even ask her, but what are you doing to show them that you should have those other opportunities? And it always came back to, well, that's not what I'm getting paid for. And that's what I mean by creating opportunities. You can't just sit back and wait for things to happen to you. You have to do the work to make them happen for you.
And you can't just sit back and talk about what your abilities are and how great you are at something. You really, it's better when you can walk the walk instead of talk the talk. You want to show someone what you're capable of and showing someone, your worth and showing someone all of the potential you have. And also, I think there's a lot to be said for that eagerness of, being fired up and applying yourself and over servicing, it's
be proactive.
Yeah, be proactive and, undersell yourself and overservice the people who are, giving you that opportunity or that you're working with. And I mean, that's opened up so many doors for you. And
it's also, as you said, about talking. And it's also talking to the right people. Because if you're talking to your friends about how much more you can do, that's great. But they don't have any control over your job unless you work for your friends.
Right.
So, but are you having these conversations with the person in charge? Like if you were working for somebody else, does your boss know that you're open to more responsibility, that you want it? Because if you're not having that conversation, how are they supposed to know? People can't read minds.
It's like you can't do the minimum and expect the maximum.
Right.
So you have to do more to open up more opportunity and more doors for yourself.
Yep.
Yeah. And I think also for creating more opportunity, you have to be brave. You have to be willing to, kind of explore those uncharted waters and just go for it.
You need to put yourself out there, which is really scary in a lot of ways.
It is. But that's how you get to new places. Yeah. And, I don't know. I'm thinking about so many different things right now. I have so many ways my mind wants to go. I know for me, a little bit of one of my stories was back in the day. I mean, ever since I was a little girl, I knew I wanted to, work on cruise ships and I wanted to cruise direct and perform and I wanted to do commercials. Those were all the things I wrote about in my journal as a little girl. Isn't that funny? I've been journaling since I was like 10.
Hey, consistency.
And,
I like it.
I found a bin of all my journals and I was so excited. There were like 30 of them and cover to cover filled up. But I used to write down how I wanted my life to look when I was older. And interestingly enough, so many of the things that I wrote down have really come to fruition for me. But I'll say, it was right after high school. I didn't want to go to college. It was just, I was one of those people. I loved to go to school. I loved the social aspects of school. I loved my teachers. I was a good kid. I was respectful, but like that whole homework part and like taking tests, oh man, that was not my jam. But I was a good kid, got through school, and I was like, I definitely do not want to go to college. And my parents, fortunately for me, were very supportive of my dream of wanting to go work on a cruise ship and go sing. And what was so neat that happened for me was I was working at a bank, hated it. I was a teller. So
is that why you dress up to go see your bank teller friends?
Maybe.
I feel like I just had an epiphany of,
oh my gosh,
of one of my Melissa Moatsisms.
I used to like it when people would come into the bank and look nice.
Fascinating. So, I'm sorry,
Weird.
I did not mean to cut
That's
you
a
off,
weird
but it
tell.
just ding.
That is ding.
Yeah.
Note to self.
Okay.
But I was a bank teller for a while and I hated it. I was like 18 and like, get me out of here, And one time my grandparents were like, hey, they have a home down in Florida, and they invited me to come down and just hang with them for like spring break time with my cousin and I. We went down, and while I was down there, my grandparents said, hey, there's this ship. It's like a dinner cruise, and it goes out to international waters, and it's like a gambling ship, and you can sing karaoke and have dinner, and it's all this fun stuff. And I was like, that sounds like fun. I was 18, so I was into it. So we went out, and next thing I know, it's dinner time, and they're talking about how there's going to be this karaoke show, and then all the stuff's coming up or whatever. And I was like, sweet, I love karaoke. And my grandparents were like, we really want you to sing tonight, like sing something really good. And I was like, all right, I'm going to do it. And I went up on stage and sang, I can't remember what I did, but some love song or whatever. And everybody was cheering me on and was really into it. And I always do this silly thing when I go up to sing karaoke, because I love to sing. I always act like I've never done karaoke before, and I'm really nervous, and I get all awkward, and I make it like I look like I'm real scared. And then I sing something I really love and I'm confident on. So then people are like, oh my gosh, you did so good. You were so brave. And it's just kind of funny to me. I don't know. I love to just I underpromise and overdeliver.
Consistency.
Thanks, Brent. It's just a silly thing I love to do. But anyway, I got done singing, and it was just an interesting thing with timing, though. That night, the director of entertainment was on the ship, and he came up and tapped me on the shoulder while I was sitting there with my grandparents, and he said, I'd like to talk with you. Could you come over and talk with me? And I didn't know who he was. I just thought he was super gorgeous, and I loved his suit, and he had awesome hair. And I was
loved his suit and hair.
I was like, who is this man? I'm like living out my Love Boat like daydream right now. Like, who is this guy? But we were talking off to the side, and he said, where are you from? What do you do for a living? And I said, oh, I live in Illinois. I'm a bank teller. It was like painful to say that.
It's still painful for you.
Sucks.
I can tell.
And he's like, you're a really good singer. And I said, oh, thank you very much. And at the time I was singing with a big band, a 20-piece big band in Chicago that I'd been performing with since I was like 16. And I loved to perform. And he said, well, have you ever considered working on a cruise ship before? Ding. I was like, as a matter of fact, I have. I was thinking back, my thought bubble popped up, ding, and I was picturing all of my journal entries of my life, like, want to work on a cruise ship. I want to work on a cruise ship. And then he said, well, the band is going to get up and perform in a little bit. And what songs do you know? And I was thinking, what songs do I not know? Like, I know every song under the sun. And he said, well, we'd like to invite you up to sing with the band tonight. And I was like, ding, okay. But talk about opportunities, right, happening before your eyes. And I was scared. I was nervous. This guy made me nervous. And I was 18. And I remember walking back to the table. My grandparents, they were so cool. And they were both like, what? And I couldn't even tell them. And my cousin too, we were like, tell us. And I said, well, it looks like I'm going to get up and sing with the band tonight. And I'm thinking like one song, right? Well, I ended up singing like a dozen songs with the band that night. Like, they were like, hey, do you know blah, blah, blah? And I was like, yeah. And then I would sing with them, and I don't know, it was like, I just became this whole different person up on the stage. And I just was like trusting in the moment. And I remembered thinking to myself while I was standing up on stage on this ship and seeing my grandparents out in the audience, it kind of gets me choked up right now, just thinking about it and seeing it. It's just like I can see it in slow motion. I was thinking, this is what I have wanted to do. And here's this moment. And I told myself, just be brave and just trust it, and just let all of your Melissa-ness hang out. Like, just go for it. Don't hold back. And so that night I did all of those things. I just went for it. And I asked him for the opportunity at the end of the night. I was like, if an opportunity arises for me to work on this ship, I would love to work with you guys. And gave him my information, and I'll never forget, I wrote it on a napkin. I wrote my phone number. Now, this is 1994. before I wrote my name and my phone number on a napkin and handed it to this guy. And basically my entire destiny was on a napkin, like whether or not this guy was going to lose this napkin or wash his pants with the napkin in his pocket. Like everything was hinging on, this napkin. And it was a few months later, but he did offer me the job. And that's when my whole life changed.
You said two things in there, trusting in the moment, and you asked for it. Mm-hmm. A lot of it comes down to asking for it. And that is creating the opportunity. You're just putting yourself out there. And I've said this many times before, but if you don't ask, you don't get. Mm-hmm. So you have to put yourself out there. I mean, and figure the worst thing that can happen is they say no. Mm-hmm. And really, is that so terrible? I was talking to somebody recently and she kept using the word rejected. She's applying for jobs and she just said, I've been rejected over and over and over. But it wasn't, in the actual definition of rejected, sure, she didn't get the opportunities. But the way it was being worded, I just thought, but rejection is so harsh. You just weren't the right fit in most cases because you're overqualified. Mm-hmm. So it's not a negative thing so much as, sure, maybe you wanted it, but you didn't get it. And it doesn't mean that you as a person were being rejected.
Yeah.
And that I think sometimes is a good thing to remember too, that sometimes you're just not the right fit.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just not the right time for you, for them. We don't know.
There's so many variables. Right. I would just say, just focus on the yeses, and keep picturing the yeses coming your way, not the no's. Mm-hmm. It's like, don't give the no's any weights. Those are the dots that are connecting you, getting you closer and closer and closer to the yeses. So just very quickly move through those so you can get to the yeses. Can I tell you one other quick note? I'm daydreaming now. Okay. My mind's wandering. I just want to share one thing. So on my desk at home, I have a picture of my cousin, Jennifer, myself, and my grandparents in front of that ship that night. The night that I boarded that ship, we took a little family photo in front of it. And that's the night that changed my life. Yeah. And so I keep it on my desk.
Yeah. How many people have a photograph of the day their life changed? Especially before the days of smartphones.
Right? I know.
Now everybody has a photo of every moment of their lives, but back then, and not that it was that long ago, but
right. It's fine, Amanda. It's cool. I can take it. But no, I have that on my desk and I framed it. And I always just like to kind of think back to that night and how I was being brave and I did ask for the opportunity, but I was also patient because it didn't happen. Right. They didn't call me the next day. It was a few months later that I got that call, but I just was so sure that like some stars aligned that in that moment. It felt so good.
And patience is a big part of it too, because just because you ask for something right away, it might not come to you right away. Yeah. You might have to ask a few times before it actually happens, but you keep working towards it.
And trust the process too. It's like, how many times have you been in a situation where you want something so bad? And I mean, it could be a place to live. It could be a car. It could be a job. It could be, whatever, a school you want to go to, whatever. And you're so sure you're holding on to it with all of your might. And then it doesn't come together for you. But then what ends up happening is something way better ends up coming together. And it always blows my mind the way that comes together.
Yeah, it's trusting the process, like you said. And you also mentioned how back in school you liked the social aspect of it. And that, when it comes to networking, is a big part of creating those opportunities. And now we know that I'm an introvert. Networking is not my favorite thing. I do not do well in big groups of people. So a lot of scheduled networking events are not right for me. Because if it's a loud, crowded place where a bunch of people are drinking and it's just loud and chaotic and there's a big crowd, I'm not going to get across what I need to. Yeah. That just doesn't work for me. Now, some people are social butterflies and they thrive in that environment. But part of the reason I bring that up is just the networking in general is you never know whose path you're going to cross. And sometimes it might not be a dedicated networking event, but you might be on an airplane. You might be at an event completely unrelated or just out and about. And for being an introvert, I do talk to a lot of strangers for that reason. And part of it is just being kind. We've talked about that. Like, I just like to have conversations with people and try to brighten their day. But you just sometimes don't know who you're going to be on the plane next to. Doesn't mean you have to talk to them the entire flight, but just sort of establishing that, hey, what's going on? I've met some people who've led to new jobs and different things just by having those little conversations. And and when you come across somebody like that, it's asking them questions, asking them for advice sometimes goes a long way. And like you just ask that guy for a job. And sometimes you have to be that bold, or even just putting it out there and just saying, look, if there's ever an opportunity to work together, here's my info. I would love to keep that going. And these days you can keep up with somebody by then adding them on social media and sending messages every once in a while and developing a relationship that way. That might lead to, in the immediate moment, they might not have anything for you, but something might come up later, and it establishes, or you've already been established in their mind, and they think, she's right for this job. Like, let's reach out to her now. Yeah. And that started by just one conversation and just putting it out there.
Yep.
I'd love to work with you sometime.
I think some of the best conversations that are to be had are with strangers. I mean, and it's interesting because that's how you make friends is by talking to strangers. So it's fun. It's really fun. That's one of the things I always do when we start a new class here at the studio is I always say, hey, let's all meet our neighbors. Everybody stop what you're doing and meet your neighbors like we're in first grade. Right. And I say, why be strangers when we can all be friends? And I think there's a lot of power in that. It's just the more people you know, and it's fun to understand, just kind of get other people's opinions and thoughts on things that you absolutely are not connected to. They don't know anything about you. They don't know anything about your life. And just asking other people questions is just so fun to get such a unique perspective and go, never saw it that way before. Thanks for showing me. I like it. Yeah. One other thing I wanted to add to the creating opportunities for yourself conversation is one of the things I do in my voiceover business. And that is about once every 6 weeks, I like to send out what I call a shout out email. And it's an email to all the people that I've ever worked with in my industry, people who've hired me for jobs, people who've sent me audition opportunities, just people I've crossed paths with or have worked with before. And it's really brief, and it's just like hey, hope you're doing great. Just wanted to check in, touch base. Hope we can work together soon. And I mention, I hope we work together soon because that's the reason why I'm writing. But what I like about doing that is all the time when I do this, people will write me back and say, maybe out of several hundred shout outs that would go out at once, I'll get maybe 3 to 5 people who will write me back the same day. And they'll say, Melissa, your timing is uncanny. I can't believe that you wrote me this email today. It just so happens that you are the perfect fit for this job that we're trying to cast right now. Would you like to voice this for us? And I'm thinking to myself, of course I want to voice that job. That's what I do. And that's why I wrote. But the point is, if I hadn't taken that moment to send out that shout out email, basically just saying, hi, here I am, hire me, remember me, we haven't worked together in a while, that opportunity I might not have been top of mind to that person for that particular job. But because I took the moment and wrote to them, I created an opportunity for myself.
Yeah. And I even want to add to that, this isn't even my own personal advice, but our good friend Shelly Avellino, who is a marketing guru, she always advises to ask an open-ended question in those emails because it sometimes starts the conversation where maybe instead of saying, I hope we can work together soon, you might just ask, do you have any opportunities to work together? And she goes beyond and personalizes it, and she will find some kind of comment about a studio or just something that she finds that's a relevant question to ask. And when I've heard her talk about that, I'm like, no wonder Shelly is so smart with her marketing, because she knows these things, but she uses that personal connection to create opportunities to keep a conversation going. So it's not just a selling email.
Sure.
It is keeping top of mind.
Yeah, that
which
is
is
a really
great.
good tip.
It's just, and I hadn't really thought about it in that way before, because I'm like you, usually if I send out something like that, that's how I do. It's like, oh, I hope we get to work together soon, or hope to see you soon. I just leave it at that. But a lot of times you won't get a response to that because it's a statement. It's not a question.
It's not a question. No, that's such a good point.
Shelly's
I love
pretty
that.
smart.
Dang, Shelly Avellino. Good tip, girl. Thank you for that. No, that is so smart. She's brilliant.
And another thing, I think it's also choosing how you use your moments. And if that makes any sense. And this goes back to way back in episode 6 when we were talking about our passion projects. And I told the story about how I got to interview Bono for the documentary.
Yeah.
And one of the things with that is, as I had mentioned, as we were trying to do this, the director and I, we would have limited opportunities to talk to the band members about what we were doing. And part of that came to, okay, chances are you're going to have maybe 30 seconds, maybe a minute, you don't know, but you're going to have a very brief period of time to talk to these people. They're very busy. There's a lot of other people who want to talk to them as well. How are we choosing to use our moments? And the people around us, a lot of times they would take their moment to get an autograph or to take a photo or to tell them something about themselves. And we used that moment to start a conversation about the project that we were working on. We did not ask for photos and autographs, and we did not talk about the usual stuff, how much you mean to us, the typical things that happen because you want to share that. We just went into business mode and was like, look, here's our project. Here's what we want from you. How do we make this happen? That's how we chose to use our moments in that. And it turned out to be successful. But that's a very specific situation. But in general, it's how are you choosing to use your moments with the people?
Love it.
And are you using it? And not, I don't use maybe isn't the right word because then it sounds like you're using these people to better yourself. But what I mean is, how are you choosing to take that opportunity out of a moment?
Yeah. Well, when that opportunity arises, what's going to be your choice, and how you use that time,
Right.
I think it's great advice.
If you happen to cross paths with somebody, maybe in your industry, maybe I was just working at a convention for the creative arts. And so there's a lot of creative people around me. So I talked whenever I had a chance. I was working, so I didn't have a ton of chances. But every person I talked to, well, what do you do? How do you do it? I met, an influencer who does really well on LinkedIn streaming. And it just, because that's how you get new ideas.
Yeah.
And you say, oh, okay, well, she's doing this. Okay. And when you ask people for advice, a lot of times they're very willing to help.
Yeah.
Because that's all you're asking for, their expertise, and that makes them feel better. Like they have something to offer and they've been through it. And it's sometimes that is going to inspire a new idea and what you can do and a new opportunity you might be able to create for yourself.
And that's just a good reminder to ask questions. Be a good listener.
Yes.
There's a lot. When you take the time to be a good listener, you can learn a lot, number one, but you can also find opportunities in that, maybe when you're being a good listener and you're asking someone else questions, they're talking about something that you could actually be of service and be a big compliment to.
Right.
And then you would not have known about that opportunity if you had just talked about yourself the entire time. And I think some people do get really caught up in just talking about themselves.
I was going to say that's the comfort zone for a lot of people, is to talk about themselves. And again, not always in a selfish way, but that's just, you're meeting somebody new, and sometimes people get nervous and then they just start talking.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of power in being quiet. We know this about me. I'm quiet, observing, and listening.
Yeah.
Because that is really because I watch how people interact with other people. I watch to see what they're doing by being quiet and not being the one talking all the time.
Yeah.
That and always goes back to instinct. And I remember having an opportunity to talk to somebody about something really, really important that I can't even talk about. But I had a friend with me and she's like, why don't he's right over there? Go talk to him, go talk to him. And I'm like, you need to slow down. It's not the right moment. And I knew this because I knew how this person operated. I knew that if I had walked over and interrupted a conversation to talk about myself, it would not have gone over well. Patience. So I stayed back and I watched and I observed and I found the perfect opening. And that's when I went in and had my conversation. Worked out perfectly. But that was the thing. And she didn't understand. And it was like blown away. She's like, how? But, it's like it was an epiphany moment for her. And she's like, so when you were sitting there telling me to stop pushing you to go over there, it's because I'm like, yes, because you have to wait for the right moment and then go in. And it's a lot of it is just perception and it's being aware and being mindful. Sometimes it's putting yourself in their position. But there's just so much to go about it. But and when it's there in front of you, you don't always have time to sit and analyze it. You have to make quick decisions.
Yep.
But
sometimes you got to be bold in that moment. But like you said, waiting for that moment that feels right, that doesn't feel forced.
Right.
You know, because I do think sometimes people do come in hot. They're coming in hot, you know.
And it was just funny the way, because in that moment, the crowd dispersed on both sides and it was just me and this person. Exactly. And it was so overwhelming. My friend who was with me, who was kind of trying to push it, she's a real empath. She feels things very deeply. When that happened and the waves parted, she got so overwhelmed with emotion. She had to leave the room.
Oh my God.
And she cried and she's just like, it was like everything just came together. And it's like, yes. But sometimes, and that, again, it's a huge specific example.
Yeah.
But you sometimes just have to create it.
And sometimes like you do create it. But I was going to say too, sometimes when you find yourself in a moment and it sneaks up on you, like similar to that night I was out on the ship or whatever, and I was talking with Mike and I was just, that's the guy, the director of entertainment. I was like, oh my gosh, this is happening. This is something that I've always thought about and it's happening. And in my mind, like my little thought bubbles were like, don't be a wimp. Say it.
Right.
Do it. Go for it. Be bold. Melissa Moats. Actually, I wasn't even Melissa Moats then. I was,
You're Melissa something else.
Melissa something else. Melissa.
I never knew your maiden name was something else.
Yeah.
Well, you learned something new today. But it's interesting when you're in that moment, you have to be brave.
Well, because here's the thing is when you're in that moment and you have the two choices, you go for it or you don't. And if you go for it, you have clarity and you have confirmation one way or another. You get a yes or you get a no. If you don't go for it, that thing is going to sit in the back of your head and you're always going to wonder what would have happened if I would have just asked for it. And I do not like what ifs because I think those are the things that can torture a person inside.
Yes. Or just regret.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
regret is the worst. And also just self-doubt. You know, if you look back and don't doubt yourself,
Right.
You know, you're amazing. Just do it. Oh my gosh. I'm not even going there right now. We're not even doing that. But opportunities are all around you. They are everywhere. If you just stop, look, listen,
Right.
trust your intuition, and let your instincts guide you. You know, that's another big part of what you just talked about was just, you know, that in that moment, that was not the right moment. You didn't want to, you knew the moment was coming. It was in that evening you were going to make, or afternoon or whatever time frame it was. In my mind, it was in the evening.
You're
okay,
right.
Good.
Yep.
Felt right in my mind.
Yeah.
I was picturing it. I saw stars. I'm just kidding. But anyway, you knew it was coming. It was just, you didn't want to force it.
And that it's a big part of just paying attention to what's around you and being aware. Like my whole life, and especially my career, has come from veering off of my path. Because I've been going one direction, but opportunity came over here. Saying yes goes a really long way. And I think back to the movie Yes Man, which is always a good one. Shonda Rhimes' book, The Year of Yes. These are all examples of sometimes you just, if an opportunity comes your way, just go for it. And maybe you didn't create it per se, but when it's in front of you, I mean, maybe it's working on a project that you maybe is out of your comfort zone. Like, hey, do you want to project manage a presidential debate for 9 months? Sure, yeah, I can do that. I mean, I have no experience with presidential debates or live events at all, but I have a brain and it works pretty good. So yeah, I can do it. That's something that I did. That job, which was a one-off job, but it led me to 3 or 4 different clients who would become some of my biggest and best clients based on that one job. Had I said, I haven't done this kind of job before, maybe I shouldn't do it. And there was that part, I almost had a moment where I thought, maybe this is too much, I don't know, because that's a lot to take over. And what if I don't do a good job at it? But then it's remembering, when have I ever not done a good job at what I'm doing for a job?
What if you do?
Right. But that led to more opportunities.
Yeah.
And when I started my business, I was going towards a very specific thing. And it's nothing like what I'm doing right now. I mean, there's little elements in there, but I was dead set of getting out of production. I'm going to do the consulting thing full time. That's not what happened. And it's so much better now because I get to do all of it, plus more, and a podcast.
Heck yeah. Well, you can proceed with caution.
Yeah.
And
then throw it to the wind.
But proceed. I think that's the word.
Proceed.
Yeah. Just keep doing it and say yes and scare yourself. And by the way, that's when you're on your toes and that's when you grow, is when you do say yes to something that scares the hell out of you. It's all of a sudden, it's like you do the big gulp and then you're like, all right, yeah, I'm doing this. I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to Google some stuff, watch some YouTube videos. And
and thankfully there are YouTube videos now. Back in the day when we were doing this stuff that was not around.
Oh my gosh. We'd have to go to the library, check out a book. Paper book.
The horror.
Yeah. I used to always love to look at the little card and see how many people had checked out the book before me.
Well,
and I'd be like, wow, 19 people have read this. Hand sanitizer for sure. I'm just kidding.
And back then was hand sanitizer readily available? I think back then we just got germs and then we got sick and we built up our immune systems so we could handle the germs.
Back in the olden days.
We don't have that anymore.
I know. Wow, I hadn't thought about that. I also like the way that they would cover the books with the protective layer, and when you'd open the book it'd be like they have this certain sound to it. I liked it.
Well, it's funny. And in a weird way, this ties in because you're talking about how old technology or lack of technology was. And in the vein of creating opportunities or taking advantage of opportunities, there's a really great documentary about Tower Records. I love documentaries and I love records and music. So obviously I think it's great. But one of the things that stood out to me the most in it is they were interviewing, he was one of the head executives from Tower Records. And he had said at the time, he didn't see any value in MP3s. He just thought, no, that's not, nobody wants their music on a file. And so Tower Records did not enter the digital world, and now they're gone. And you don't want to be the guy who said MP3s are never going to go anywhere. You don't want to be that guy. And it's you. Yeah. And I get it. It was new and it was foreign and nobody really knew. And it just seemed crazy. But look at where we're at now. Who buys, besides me, who actually still buys a record?
Right.
Or, well, actually, shouldn't say record because vinyl has had this big resurgence with the kids. But it's coming back. Vinyl is coming back. But CDs, I call it my antiques collection because I don't even know how many, but I have a whole wall full of CDs that is my entire childhood and teenage years because every Tuesday I would go buy every new release that came out. That was my routine. And now they're all there. They add color. It means something to me, but everything lives on my computer. I don't ever handle a physical disc or a tape or anything.
They're like coasters at this point, you know. It's like, oh, pass me a CD.
Right.
I set my drink on it.
Yeah.
But
sometimes you have to take the gamble. And
I do wonder, sometimes I'll think about what 10 years from now or 20 years from now, what is going to be happening that we can't even imagine right now. Like it's just completely out of our paradigm. Wow.
But somebody out there is going to create an opportunity.
Yeah, they see an opportunity right now in this moment.
Yeah.
Maybe we are sparking an idea
Maybe.
to someone who's listening to this podcast who's going to just invent something so cool.
You
I don't
never know.
Game changer.
Yep, could be.
But you know, opportunities are all around you. And are you listening? Are you paying attention? Are you asking questions? Are you meeting strangers? What are you doing? Because you have to get out there into the world and explore to kind of uncover some of these opportunities. So don't be shy.
And to prove that you are listening, there's two things you could do. Number one, send us a message and tell us what we just revealed was Melissa's real last name. And number two, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening, and let other people know that listening to the Womanpreneur podcast is a great opportunity to learn something. I don't know.
To get inspired.
Something, however
and
you
we
feel.
want to know we're doing a good job. So let us know, guys. And if there's something you want to hear about or a topic you'd like us to cover or a guest, someone that you would love to hear from in a, particular business or, just somebody who has a really cool haircut. I don't know. Let us know. We would like to interview them for you and create that opportunity for you. Wow. Got real quiet.
There's our awkward ending.
Hey, thanks a lot for listening. Have a great, great day.
Go find an opportunity.
Thanks for tuning into the Womanpreneur podcast. Until next time, you've got this.